We've all heard them. Hell, we grew up with them. Whether you first heard of an escaped mental patient with a hook haunting the local teen makeout spot, a vanishing hitchhiker on a lonely road, a stranger making calls from upstairs, or that you should never mix pop rocks and soda, these modern-day tall tales have been a part of our culture for as long as anyone can remember.
So it's no wonder we've got tons of movies based on them. And what better subject to make a horror film about? Hell, there's even some flicks that spawn their own little weird stories.
Remember the Blair Witch Project? This film was marketed with missing posters of its actors, and the film itself was shot in a rough documentary style that convinced audiences that it was real footage of these missing students they were seeing. Another example is the infamous controversies surrounding Ruggero Deodato's brutal classic Cannibal Holocaust. Not only was Deodato arrested and charged with obscenity shortly after its release, but a year later, after some dipfuck in France wrote an article claiming that several actors were actually killed on screen, murder was added to his list of charges. Of course, this was total bullshit, and he had the missing actors appear on TV and produce production photos that explained how the effects were achieved, which, needless to say, got the charges dropped.
I mean, seriously, come on. Who would make a snuff film and then show it to a bunch of people? You guys want to see something?
Oh, and this is my favorite. There are still people to this fucking day that think Leatherface was a real person.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, he was a real person. Yep. 100%. I was actually a guard at the prison in Texas where they kept him, He worked in the kitchen. You assholes! So what does any of this stuff I've been talking about have to do with the film I'm reviewing? Well, that would be because it's based on an urban legend that's been around for a very long time.
The legend of the Cropsey Maniac is one of the original cautionary tales about a lunatic lurking in the woods or abandoned buildings waiting for you to get too close. It's a modern spin on the old boogeyman story that has probably existed since people first sat huddled around a campfire and looked out into the darkness and shuddered. And while the residents near Staten Island's abandoned Seaview Hospital didn't come up with the idea of a murderer haunting the nearby woods, they did give him a name, and the burning gave him a face. The film begins in a boys' bunk at Camp Blackfoot, where a group of mop-headed rapscallions are planning to scare the shit out of the ill-tempered caretaker, Cropsey. After setting up the gag, the boys begin not so subtly tapping on the window and making ridiculous faces, causing him to wake up and see something horrifying. But their harmless prank goes awry as Cropsey flips the fuck out and accidentally sets himself on fire.
Interesting little fact about this scene. The burning hand reaching for the doorknob was actually Tom Savini's who did the effects for the film. He had put on multiple layers and coated his arm in rubber cement and set it on fire, which ended up steam cooking his hand. So you should definitely not try that at home.
Jump to a week later and we have a genius orderly who's decided he's going to put the fear in a new hire by showing him what happens when you store your gas can at the foot of the fucking bed. 5 years after the opening credits, we get a voiceover explaining that Cropsey has incurable shitty melty face and shouldn't hold a grudge against the kids that flash cooked him. Yeah, I'm sure he won't. So after years of recovering from horrendous injuries and most likely undergoing tons of grueling hours of physical therapy and treatment, what's the first thing you would do? Why, go kill a hooker, of course. Duh, what the hell did you think I was going to say? And now we switch over to Mushroom. Jesus. Sorry. Here we have a perfectly family-friendly game of potential date rape planning going on. But the ball gets knocked down in the woods and we get our first glimpse of our killer's preferred weapon. Come on, Tiger! Really? The chick with the haircut that makes her look like a bipedal schlong's name is Tiger. Oh, 80s. You got some stuff right, but the shit you got wrong? Wow. So now we're at dinner and Karen is talking to Michelle about the trouble she's having with Eddie.
Sometimes he really scares me.
You mean the guy that was salivating at your ass earlier and ordered you to go meet him in the rec room by yourself at night? Nah, I'm sure he just wants you to teach him how to crochet or something. Totally on the up and up. The following morning we follow one of the girls named Sally to the shower where she is startled by the kid from the money pit. This is Alfred, the shy, awkward, misunderstood kid whose idea of scaring people is a Class A misdemeanor. Luckily he is defended by Todd, who tries to get him to stop being such a fucking weirdo. And this strapping young lad is Glazer. He's a giant bag of dicks, who may or may not have shit himself in this scene. Here we are introduced to the rest of the gang. Fish, Dave, and Woodstock. In case you missed my previous description, Glazer is a giant shithead, and he thinks that pushing people who can't swim into lakes is funny. Wonder if we ever spent a summer at Crystal Lake. That would definitely explain some shit. Anyway, Alfred and his friends get some much-needed revenge by embarrassing Glazer in front of the girls, and... oh, come on!
Great, because I really needed to fucking censor Fisher Stevens' balls.
Well, it's the day of the big overnight canoe trip where the boys are separated from the men and the victims from the survivors. So we get a nice transition from lighthearted camp shenanigans to straight-up murderfest as Todd tells a variation on the very familiar scenario before Eddie jumps out and I think Woodstock pisses himself.
You're dead!
I hope they really enjoyed that big laugh they just had, because we're 40 minutes in and it's time for Cropsey to remind us all exactly what kind of movie we're watching. Jump to Karen in potential sex crime taking a moonlit stroll and... Jesus, man. You're supposed to kiss her, not grab her skull and latch on like a fucking face hugger. Can't imagine why she tried to push you away. So he somehow manages to convince her to go skinny dipping with him, but ditches her after she resists his clumsy attempts to remove her face with his mouth. Butthurt, thy name is Eddie. While Eddie angrily swims off his boner, Karen discovers that her clothes have been strewn throughout the woods, and hey, what do you know, her blouse comes with a free throat trim. That morning, Dick Shine is kicked awake and interrogated by Todd and Michelle because Karen is still missing and the canoes apparently got bored and left. After deciding everyone, which apparently only means the kids and not these two, goes out to search for the missing canoes, our ragtag band starts constructing a raft while Glazer spouts some of the lamest shit I have ever heard.
Listen, you can trust me, you hear? It's gonna be real good. Real good, I promise.
And there's Alfred not improving his image at all. So a small group of happy campers heads out on their makeshift vessel and think they've hit a stroke of luck when they happen upon one of their missing boats. However, that boat is full of death!
That's all. Is it?
I'm sorry, Sally. I don't know what
It's
happened.
okay.
Loser.
For some reason, Sally is having hilariously unfulfilling sex with Glazer, and while he runs off to get some matches for a fire, our crispy killer shows up again to make her regret the last 30 seconds of her life before giving Glazer a better death than he deserves. Fortunately, our heroic peeper saw the whole thing and runs back to camp to get Todd, but he's little help and the chase is on, while Michelle and the rest make a gruesome discovery. Now Todd springs into action, sending the rest for help and grabbing an axe and heading out to search for Alfred, who's in quite the pickle. Having followed Alfred's cries to the killer's hideout, Todd is ambushed and confronted by his past as Cropsey comes after him with a makeshift flamethrower. The hell did he get that? Just as things look hopeless for our handsome hero, Alfred manages to stop being a huge bitch for 5 seconds, free himself, and jab Cropsey's shears right through his fucking back. However, our deep-fried psycho isn't done yet and ambushes said bitch boy attempting to throttle him, but Todd mistakes his face for the guy who edited the end of this movie and buries his axe in it. Then Alfred uses the flamethrower to finish the job Todd and his buddies mistakenly started all those years ago. The movie closes with another group somewhere else, telling the legend of Cropsey around a campfire, hinting that just maybe he's still out there.
Don't move. You're dead!
I love this movie, and I will never understand why it hasn't gotten more recognition. What's that you say? Oh, come on, Grimm, it's just another 80s Friday the 13th ripoff. Well, first of all, who the fuck said that?
And second of all, the original treatment for the film was created in 1979. Originally called just The Cropsey Maniac, it was registered in 1980, a full month before Friday the 13th was released. Other interesting things to note about this movie's production are that during a casting call for another slasher flick, one of the actresses talked about how her boyfriend was acting in The Burning, and that led to that film's story, which also happened to be about the Cropsey legend, to be altered, which led to the production being delayed until 1982. Which movie was this? Well, it's a fun little movie called Madman, which I should totally do sometime.
The Burning also features quite a huge amount of amazing talent. All the red stuff was handled by everyone's favorite gore guy, Tom Savini. Savini actually turned down doing the effects for Friday the 13th Part 2 in favor of doing them for this film. When he was asked why he did this, well, he said that not only did he not understand how the hell Jason was actually still alive and fully grown and now the killer, but that he just liked the script for The Burning better. The cast also features a ton of young up-and-comers that were then unknown but went on to be very successful. This includes Brian Matthews, who went on to be a regular on soap operas like The Young and the Restless and Days of Our Lives. Leah Ayres, who appeared in a ton of TV shows throughout the 80s and early 90s, but I will always probably remember her best for starring in the awesome classic badass Van Damme tournament fighter flick, Bloodsport. The always awesome Larry Joshua, who's appeared in a shit ton of fucking movies and TV shows, ranging from the X-Files movie, the criminally overlooked and underrated Shakedown, a small role in Spider-Man, and even had parts in the Academy Award-winning films Dances with Wolves and Unforgiven. And we've got Fisher Stevens, who turned out to be an extremely versatile guy, who's done everything from documentary filmmaking, producing, writing, narrating, and acting in a huge amount of movies and TV shows. But even though he's done all this stuff, I will always personally remember him as the Plague from Hackers. And you didn't really think I wasn't going to mention that this was the big screen debut of a very young Jason Alexander that sported a full head of hair. He's a really funny and talented guy who went on to star in such modern classics as Blank Man, Dunstan Checks In, and The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle. He was also in some long-running TV show called Kramer or some shit. I don't know, I don't watch TV. Like I said, for a long time this movie was relatively unknown, but it's gained a lot of recognition and quite the cult following. Now it seems to be viewed as a 80s horror slasher classic that you can put right up front with the likes of William Lustig's Maniac, Joseph Zito's criminally overlooked The Prowler, and the Christmas classic Silent Night, Deadly Night. Which brings me to another thing I'd like to talk about. Should The Burning be remade? It's been talked about for a while. My opinion? Fuck no! Let's face it, not only does Hollywood have a shit track record with remaking these fucking movies, but this also isn't just another dumb little slasher flick, okay? If you were to cut all of the scenes of the characters just interacting and having fun and playing pranks on each other and put them together, you'd think you were watching some kind of little goofy comedy film. And if you haven't noticed, that's the exact fucking opposite of what happens when they remake these kinds of fucking movies. Don't believe me? Instead of sitting here all day and going through a laundry list of fucking films, I'm just gonna give you the big four and tell you exactly why the remakes are shit.
Friday the 13th? Okay, well, instead of actually trying to do something creative or original with the franchise, let's just go ahead and jam the first 4 films into one, cast a bunch of unmemorable and vapid characters played by vapid and unmemorable actors with the exception of Sam, get rid of that whole inventive kill thing the series is known for and have a bunch of bland, uninspired deaths, and shoehorn in a Frankenstein version of the ending from Friday the 13th.2 that we've stretched into a subplot that makes no fucking sense. While the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't as bad as the others, not even an over-the-top R. Lee Ermey could save it from its complete lack of suspense and atmosphere. What was an insane, gritty, fucking experience has been reduced to a by-the-numbers fucking slasher flick. Full of memorable characters like Uncle Monty and whoever the fuck these people are. And, you know, those teens that got killed, Boobs and Rusty Trombone. And let's not forget Leatherface has been reduced to Baby Huey with skin disease who kills people because he's fuck ugly and got pick plastic kickball. Oh Jesus, do you really need me to explain this one to you? How about a director and a bunch of actors that barely bothered to even fucking phone it in? A script that completely destroys any menace or mystery that the antagonist had. God-fucking awful recreations of iconic scenes. And an ending that references the goddamn crossover film instead of, oh, I don't fucking know, trying something original. Not to mention, just about everything in this movie is cliched, tired, uninspired, and fucking boring. Let's not forget that Freddy has absolutely no reason to have the glove. It's not explained. He's not the Springwood slasher, he's just some asshole. And let's not forget Rob Zombie's forays into remake territory. I mean, come on, screw subtlety, atmosphere, and tension. Let's just jam a white Shatner mask on Jason Voorhees, show some boobs, cram in a 40-minute backstory that demystifies the character that nobody asked for, and see how much of the character development we can replace with shitty 4-letter word-ridden dialogue. Oh, and don't forget the unnecessary rape scene. And since I think I'm discount Tim Burton and no one else will hire her, I'm gonna go ahead and put my wife in every single movie I make, even though her acting range is that of a phone left off the hook next to a flaming bag of dog shit.
Man, I'm getting way off topic here. Back to the original point of this review. If you've never seen The Burning, and you're a fan of slasher flicks or even just horror movies in general, I highly recommend you check it out. It's one of my personal favorites, and not only a great example of what 80s slasher flicks had to offer when they were done well, but how to turn a little campfire story into a legend.